Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the Path 11 podcast. I am your host, April Hanna. At the Path 11 podcast, we are here trying to deliver leading-edge research on consciousness, healing, and metaphysics. And just like you, we are trying to answer the big questions about life. Who are we? Why are we here? And what is our purpose? We hope by listening to our podcast, it will make each day you live on Earth a little easier to understand. And now for today's podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. This is going to be a fantastic one. I actually haven't talked about this subject in quite a while, so if you are interested in reincarnation, maybe you believe in it and want to learn more, or maybe you are very skeptical and you don't believe that we just keep coming back, that once we're dead, I think my guest might change your mind. I would like to welcome you to meet Andy Myers. He is a psychic medium, inspirational speaker, life coach, and best-selling author of multiple award-winning books. He made hundreds of appearances on popular radio stations nationwide and is one of the most respected psychic mediums in the country. Andy is known for his sincerity, humor, and remarkable insights into the spirit world. He travels often to conduct sold-out lectures in cities around the country. He has been delivering psychic readings for over a decade, and is highly regarded for his expertise in the subject of past lives and reincarnation. I had the opportunity to review his book, The Sky Diaries. It's actually beautiful. This is a picture of his daughter on the front cover. And again, it's called The Sky Diaries, A True Story of Reincarnation. So we're going to get right to it, and we are going to talk about if reincarnation actually exists and what that is and what it might look like. And Andy has some testimonials of his own personal life that he is going to be able to share that just might change your mind. So Andy, welcome to the Path 11 podcast.
Thanks for having me, April. I'm happy to be here. And as you're, kind of doing the introduction, one thing came to mind, the saying that a lot of people kind of catchphrase when they say YOLO, you only live once. It always makes me chuckle when people say that, because I think to myself, well, actually, we get multiple chances. So yeah, it's almost like YALA, you always live again. That's what I think it should be.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Great. Well, before we kind of get into this really fascinating topic, I would love to know just a little bit more about your background and how did you end up, coming into the world of being a psychic medium? Was there any job occupation that you did prior to? And how did you land here in becoming a medium and now, being an author of many books? And you also have a podcast that, we'll talk about later on too. So I'd love to hear your journey and the beginning of this story.
Yeah, well, the most ironic thing about being a psychic medium is I can't always predict my own future. So, early on in childhood and through high school and college, it became pretty apparent in my mind anyways, that I wanted to help other people. So in college, I actually got a degree in social work. So I ended up working in mental health facilities and after school programs and everything in between. And, as I was in the midst of doing that, and I thought I had found my calling, well, I had a near-death experience in the fall of 2006. And it was profoundly wonderful, actually. And, I was in contact with some loving entity or a higher power. And when I came to from that, I just felt different. I felt, awake for the first time ever. And I knew that, there was some spiritual undertones to what my future was going to look like. And at that point, I really felt like my intuition was heightened, because I actually began sensing and feel information about strangers. I'd be at the pumping gas, and all this information was popping in my head about the person next to me, or I'd be at the grocery store and the information would come to me about strangers. And of course, with my background in mental health, I thought, okay, I'm delusional. This is it. I've lost my mind. Well, with support and tremendous support from family and friends, they suggested I try to verify and validate with these strangers. And to my relief, when I did speak with them, the information generally checked out. And one thing led to another, and I found myself on some radio programs around the country doing mediumship live on the air, which just always interesting. And, kind of the rest is history, I guess. So yeah, I've been doing this psychic readings and mediumship readings for many years. And one of the coolest parts is just getting the chance to meet so many cool people, many of which have amazing stories involving miracles and angels and the afterlife. And I get to meet parents and grandparents who have these, 3 and 4 and 5-year-old kids who have these memories of who they used to be in past lifetimes. And the subject of reincarnation and past lives, over the years, it's kind of morphed from an interest to a hobby to a full-blown passion. And now I've written the Sky Diaries, which is my family's life story of how we piece together clues and evidence that we have all in fact crossed paths many times in multiple past lifetimes. So it's been to answer your question with a very wordy response. Yeah, that's my path. It's been a very winding path. We took the scenic route, I suppose, to get to where we are now. But yeah, I'm happy to be on the show to talk about these topics.
Yeah, so interesting. And I can just really appreciate too, because I've been a mental health therapist for about 20 years. And when I was kind of going through my own spiritual awakening, also kind of self-diagnosing myself and being like, okay, how and who do I tell some of these experiences to without people, thinking that I am experiencing some sort of thought disorder or some psychosis. So I definitely appreciate that. Now, I just kind of want to go back a little bit to your NDE. I've spoken to quite a few people that have been on the Path 11 podcast that are NDEers. And I just always find it so fascinating and interesting because there really is kind of this theme that runs along people that have had this experience. And many people, like your experience too, it's like you come back with this heightened perception, maybe even a little bit of fear being dissolved around death and intuitive abilities increasing and things like that. What happened with your near-death experience? What happened?
Well, what people don't tell you about NDEs in the small print is the funk or the depression that comes afterwards. And everyone's talking about, the seeing God or seeing their version of a higher power. But, when I came to from that, yeah, everything, I kind of detached a little bit, like nothing in the world really interested me anymore, because when you stand on the doorstep of heaven and you live to tell about it, I mean, that's like seeing a 4K high def TV and then only having access to black and white images from then on. It's like, oh man, like almost a part of you longs to be there, because you see and feel how beautiful it was. Long story short, I have a case of sleep apnea, and it kind of fluctuates between moderate to, it fluctuates on that scale. I think what had happened that night in November of 2006, I think I stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And through my bedroom ceiling, there was a hole in my ceiling, and I had a vision of the universe, glowing stars and nebula. It was just the most beautiful. I mean, there's no words to describe the colors that I was seeing. And, I floated up. This higher presence was telling me if I wanted to be reunited with my departed loved ones and have the answers to all my questions, all I needed to do was to float into the universe. And I did. I felt my spirit detached from my body. I was floating up, and right as I was on the verge of floating past my ceiling, I had a change of heart, and I told this higher power that I wasn't ready to go after all, that I had some big purpose that I needed to accomplish, and and most importantly, I still had a lot of people to help. And at the time, I didn't know how or why, but my wish was granted. My spirit body slammed back into my physical body. I awoke with like gasping for air. And yeah, and little did I know at the time, I had no idea at the time it would lead me down the path to be an author and psychic medium. And that's one of 100 crazy events in the Sky Diaries, but that's kind of where my spiritual journey began. And from then on, it believe it or not, it gets more and more bizarre. But yeah, near-death experiences are powerful. I'm just, that's a pretty tame version what I went through compared to, these other cases of people almost passing in a car accident and things like that. But overall, I think mine was a good experience, and it, like I said, it heightened my intuition, and I already believed in an afterlife, but up until then and still since my experience, I've never had the pleasure to experience something so overwhelmingly positive. Like the love, the peace, the euphoria that I sensed looking at the universe. It's it's unlike anything I can put into words.
Yeah. I'm also really glad, though, that you did talk about the depression that can come in during reintegration.
Yeah.
I remember it was the first documentary that Mike and I were making. It's called The Path Afterlife. And there was a woman who was struck by lightning and died, had a near death experience. And, we're sitting there in her living room and interviewing her, and it had happened years ago, but still the raw emotion. And she had said, this is still really hard to talk about because even though I knew that I needed to come back for my children, she said, I just want to go back. She said,
Yeah.
I just have this longing and this feeling, like you said, when you're kind of at that 4K high definition TV and then you go back to black and white. And we had to stop the filming for a little bit because, her emotions had come and, it was a really interesting just point for me, in learning that and to really see the emotional struggle. Although, you make that choice like, okay, I know I have to go back. I have people to help. She had her children, whatever the case may be. It was still a very palatable feeling of what she missed and just wanting to return back home is what she called it.
Yeah. And that's a really good way to put it, to go back home. And even for those who haven't experienced an NDE, I've noticed that, during the last couple of years, just with the pandemic and everything else, I've spoken with countless clients of mine who are going through their own awakening, like a spiritual renaissance, a resurgence where their newfound, obsession is to become more spiritual, more centered, more intuitive. And and part of me is thinking like, what a weird time to have a spiritual breakthrough, when the world's shut down and everything looks like the Twilight Zone. But I don't know. I think it's kind of a wake up call at this point in time for people that, even yes, we get multiple lifetimes, but still the most important one is the one that we're currently living. So why not make the best out of it, and find peace, find balance, find a way to, make your own little corner of the world, to leave it in better shape than it was when we arrived here. So,
right.
Why not? Why not? So it's refreshing to see so many people going through, this rejuvenation, and, everyone has their own path. So everyone's experiencing it in different ways. But one commonality that I'm seeing, and you probably have too, April, is just people who are becoming more selective about who they're spending their time with. Yeah. Shedding certain individuals in the perimeter of their social group who maybe have been dragging them down.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about everything shutting down with the pandemic, it allowed for stillness, right? And what do they teach the most about becoming still, and meditation? It's like, be still and I am there. That's where you can kind of find some of those answers. So I think it makes sense that a lot of people are beginning to come into their spiritual awakening because a lot of people were forced to stop moving, to stop working, to stop just go, 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 go. And they had to be with themselves and be with the people that they were living with. So, all right, but let's talk about reincarnation. There was this in the very beginning. I love this. I highlighted this because you were kind of talking about this whole concept of reincarnation. And is it really possible? And I had highlighted in your book, furthermore, if we only get one lifetime, right? So you're trying to say, okay, let's say there's no reincarnation. We only get one lifetime here on Earth. Our souls would hardly get a chance to participate in this game's life. It's proven that Homo sapiens have been around for approximately 200,000 years. So if we only get one lifetime and we each live to be 100 years old, we would only participate in 0.0005% of human history.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. That doesn't make sense. So let's talk about reincarnation. And I know that this is what you and I talk about this all the time, but sometimes I have to be aware that somebody who is new on their spiritual path that is just finding out about reincarnation or has not even heard of it, let's just define what is reincarnation. So how do you understand the definition of reincarnation? What does that mean?
Well, first of all, I hope my math teacher from high school is listening to this because I hope they're proud of my work there. You can fact check me, but that's about the extent of my math skills right there. It was never my best subject.
Yeah.
But reincarnation, as I believe it to be, is the truth that we not only survive death, but that we're still a conscious being afterwards, and that we get the choice to come back if we want to, in a different body, under different circumstances. Sometimes we reincarnate into the same family tree, and that's when things get really interesting and really cool. But Yeah, it only makes sense. And I have to admit, as a child, I wasn't raised to believe in reincarnation. I was, I tried to absorb what they were teaching in church. And as I got older and older, it slowly started to make more sense. We humans, myself included, big time, we don't always get it right on the first try.
Mhm.
To master something, whether it's walking, speaking, or juggling, it takes multiple attempts, practice, patience, repetition. Mistakes are guaranteed when you're first starting out. And so scale that up to life itself. Yeah, of course we need multiple attempts to get it right. And perhaps it's not just about getting it right. I think the part of the purpose of reincarnation is variety itself. The chance to view life through multiple lenses, to experience what it's like to be male and female, to be black, white, and every shade in between, karmically, to have the pleasure to experience what it's like, not just as the patient, but also as the doctor, not just as the troublemaker, but also as the police officer, to get the reverse side of every coin. And I think when we're given the chance to have that much variety, it suddenly feels like we're looking at life through a picture window, as opposed to if we just got one chance, it would be like looking at life through a keyhole. We wouldn't be able to truly understand what it means to be human if we, me as a white male in middle America, no, like we need more variety. And I think reincarnation grants us that gift.
Yeah. So you had talked about that sometimes we reincarnate into the same family tree at times. Now, I've heard the concept of soul contracts, that we kind of travel in the same soul group. So it's interesting. I never thought that maybe would have reincarnated outside of a different. I think I've been traveling with my family for a long time. So just kind of want to get your thoughts about that. Like, do we really have this soul group? Are we constantly reincarnating with the same people and playing different roles? Or can we actually reincarnate into a totally different family structure? Never even thought about that. I just kind of thought I had these set couple hundred of people and, we're just going to kind of keep coming back together.
Yeah, and I guess free will grants us the ability to choose, to choose which option we want. I think it's entirely possible, if we wanted to take a break from our soul group and go live a lifetime in a different part of the world, we can. That being said, I think like you were just explaining, it is more common that most of the time we kind of run around in a soul group. So whether it's 20 people or 100 people, it's people that are currently in your life that have been in your past lives, maybe in different capacities. Maybe your current spouse used to be your best friend in a past life, or maybe a coworker that you really click with used to be your sibling in a past lifetime. But nothing gives me goosebumps more than these stories that I hear, hundreds, if not thousands of examples by now over the years, that these parents and grandparents who have these young kids, usually they're 3 or 4 when they start saying things like this, but children will say, they'll just out of nowhere, they'll be like, I remember when I was big and you were little and I was your parent.
Okay.
Or, they'll say, that's not the way I did it when I was your grandpa and we lived in that blue house down by the river and we were picking apples from the tree. It's like the record, if this was a movie, the record scratches, the music stops, people are looking at each other like, come again? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Because their past life memories, like there's no reference point, why would a child speak of being big before? Why would a child look at their parent and claim that they remember when the parent was little? Like that doesn't even make any sense, and not only that, there's these children who remember past lives in such great detail that the information can actually be verified either through family tree, which was the case in my family, through paperwork and documents, you can find names. But in other cases, like historical records, people, there's kids who, claim to have been like a famous playwright in Hollywood, and it's one thing if you say, oh, I wrote Gone with the Wind, but there's a case out there of a kid who not only claims he wrote Gone with the Wind, but he can name all the family members that were in that family and when the movie came out and what his nickname was and all this information that nobody would even know. And then you have other kids who remember what it's like in between lifetimes, the whatever you choose to call that, the other side or home or heaven, these kids who will speak of deceased family members as if they got well acquainted with them before being born. They'll point to 4-year-old Caden will point to a picture on the wall and be like, oh, that's that's Buck, but that's Buck. His name was Bobby, but people called him Buck. And he liked to go fishing, in this place in Indiana, and the family's like, yeah, that's true. But you never met him because he died 10 years before you were born. And the kid shrugs his shoulders and runs off to watch cartoons, not knowing any difference. So it's like, what do you do? What do you do with that? Some people react with fear or skepticism or just don't even give it a second thought. But I think for the other chunk of the population, it leaves us wondering, what if we survive death? What if we come back again? What if we come back to the same family tree? I view it as a blessing. It makes me excited personally.
Yeah. And I have heard some of those stories, not some of the ones that you mentioned with Gone with the Wind, but I know that there were a couple that kind of made mainstream news, was on the media. I think one child was claiming to be, was it Lou Gehrig, baseball, and just really interesting. And I think when we hear it from children, adults tend to trust it a little bit more, right? Because like you said, how would they even know? How do they have this amount of information at the age that they are? We tend to be a little more skeptical maybe of adults like you and I. Say we do a past life regression and they say, okay, I was, I don't know, Cleopatra. I didn't have a past life like this, but let's just say, oh, and I am this reincarnated. And we might be like, oh, okay, that's interesting,
Yeah, because they think, oh, she just wants a gold tiara,
Right. Maybe I do, but yeah, so there's something about the innocence of hearing these stories from children that I think allow adults to be able to be a little more trusting and allows us maybe to really investigate the magic behind that. And how is that? There is no explanation. It's, that's pretty fascinating.
It's jaw dropping, when it happens. And in my book, not to spoil the ending of the story, but when my daughter Sky was, right on the verge of 3 years old, she began having memories of who she used to be. And as long as I live, I'll never forget that moment. Because when she said what she said and I connected the dots and I realized who she was, it was somebody really, really important and influential in my life. And I just started crying. I'm glad she didn't notice. And I went inside and I got her mom and I said, can you go hang out with Sky for a second? I need a moment. And she's like, oh my God, what happened? I was like, you'll never believe what she just said. And then from there, it was just this avalanche of comments and memories, just quite, it's uncanny, And one of the frequent comments that people ask me as a psychic medium, and not even because they're being skeptical so much as they're just curious, they just want to learn more about it. They'll say, okay, if a psychic medium can in fact speak with deceased people in heaven, how is that possible? Because reincarnation would suggest that they're already back living another lifetime. Mm-hmm. And it's a really intelligent question. And I think the answer to that is because when a person crosses into the afterlife, we generally spend quite a bit of time over there before coming back again. In most cases, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, there's a good chunk of time where we catch our breath, attend some parties, have some fun, catch up with people that we lost. And we do all that before coming back for another adventure on Earth. But in some cases, oftentimes the case of these children who remember their past lifetimes, sometimes the reason they do remember past lives is because there hasn't been that much time that went by since they were alive. So you'll have these rare examples of a quick turnaround where 7 or 10 years later, a child reincarnates with still remembering who they used to be. And if the kid reincarnates back into the same family tree, like we've talked about, then the family can sometimes connect the dots to figure out, that their comments, in fact, make sense.
Yeah. When I interviewed a nuclear physicist kind of about that same question, the way that he kind of described it is that, we're consciousness and that each time we reincarnate and come here, he would call it an experience packet. So that consciousness has an experience kind of similar to something downloaded on a computer and it becomes a file, and then the consciousness leaves the physical body, goes into the live between lives, and then the consciousness will reincarnate into another experience packet. So it's kind of like, even though we're here in the physical body, our consciousness is still out in the ethers, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But the imprint of this lifetime kind of becomes information and data for an experience packet. that we can access, and probably what it is that you do when you are connecting with loved ones. Because it's not like their loved one might have been gone, who knows, maybe 40 years, and maybe they have been reincarnated, but you're also tapping into the information of the consciousness that had that experience here on earth, not necessarily the human body that we remember. And, we're talking, to the Father on a cloud up in sky somewhere, but really accessing the information of the consciousness that is always there of that person.
And that's a really good point, April. Said another way, it could be possible that part of our soul remains in the afterlife while the other half of our soul is down here on earth having a human experience.
Right.
And there's actually, speaking of physics, there is some quantum physics that actually checks out that proves that might in fact be possible for part of our soul to be in the afterlife while part of us is here having a human experience. There was a documentary, I think it was called What the Bleep Do We Know? Mm-hmm. That's the name of it. But they go into like when science meets spirituality. And I'm going to butcher some of the terminology, so forgive me because I'm far from a nuclear physicist. But they did this experiment where they took a little bit of matter. I don't know if it was a molecule or something like that. And they cut it in half. And they literally kept half of the molecule in a petri dish in controlled conditions in a lab, on Earth. And they literally flew the other half of the molecule up into orbit in outer space. And what they found, to put it in layman's terms, is when they would wiggle the particle down here on Earth, the corresponding half in outer space would wiggle at the same time and in the exact same fashion with no lag. There was no delay. It was almost as if they were still connected.
Right.
And so, how is that possible? They didn't have an answer as to how that's possible unless there's consciousness within that molecule and it was still, somehow connected. So you scale that logic up to a soul level. Yeah, it might in fact be possible for us to be both on earth and in heaven at the same time. And then you get into, are we living multiple lifetimes at the same time? And then I'm reaching for the Tylenol because that gives me a headache. That's like some Doctor Strange multiverse type stuff. That's way beyond me.
Yeah.
It's fun to consider all these things. And again, I just think the thought of second chances, it's just really beautiful how, in this vast, universe, in our world of 8 billion souls, how, we can find people in our soul group and come back for future adventures. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. And so we don't want to give away the Sky Diaries, this book, but do you want to share some other experiences that you have had that without a shadow of a doubt, either within your own family that you really know that reincarnation happens? Can you share something with us?
Oh my gosh. I think the problem is that there's too many examples. One actually that I mentioned in my book, it's a case that had to do with a child who lived, I believe it was on the border of Israel and Syria in a region called Golem Heights. But this boy, I believe he was like 4 years old at the time, and he kept telling his family that in his previous lifetime, he was murdered because somebody hit him in the head with an axe. Well, the family took him to where this allegedly happened because it was only like a day's travel away. And when they got there, the child took them to the spot where it supposedly happened. And sure enough, they started digging and they found a skeleton with a skull fracture. And they looked back at the boy, and the boy had a birthmark on his forehead in the same spot where the skull was fractured. And so they started digging more, and they found an axe buried, murder weapon buried. And the boy suddenly remembered the guy's name who did this heinous crime, and authorities got involved. And long story short, they took this guy to court and convicted him of murder. They had enough evidence. So he was ratted out by the guy he killed. Because he came back. I think there was a 7-year turnaround or something like that. So he came, so you have cases like this. You also have cases of, it's in the wheelhouse of, soul consciousness and cell consciousness. But you have these cases of organ donors and organ recipients. Sometimes an organ recipient will take on the personality traits and even memories of the organ donor. In my book, there's a case of I believe it was a 10-year-old girl who received a heart from another girl who was murdered. And the girl with the new heart started having enough images and visions and, almost these nightmares of how it happened that they gathered enough evidence to figure out who did it. And again, that person was convicted. So it's in a roundabout way, it kind of does prove the fact that, reincarnation is true, because it kind of demonstrates how our physical body is basically like a computer, and our soul is like the portable USB with, our soul, the information is still intact no matter which device you plug it into. So no matter which body you plug this data into, sometimes the information is still there from previous versions of ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I've always found those stories to be really fascinating, especially with the organ donors and donations. I remember hearing a story of a woman that received a heart, I think, from an older man. And when she had the heart transplant, maybe it was liver transplant, not sure which organ, but she would crave certain foods that she would never eat. And she was connected to the family of the donor. And, they were able to confirm, oh, yeah, he loved his French fries or, whatever the case may be. And that is interesting. And in the case of, this person remembering, or getting images of the murder too, it's like you wonder, it may not necessarily be the organ, but does the organ connect to the consciousness of that person? And is that consciousness communicating to the person? Because, the organ or the heart is kind of like the GPS. Okay, that's where I am. All right, let me start to communicate with this person to resolve something like a murder. So, I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah. And those are kind of extreme cases. There's much more lighthearted examples throughout my book as well. But it's been well received. The Sky Diaries. We just had the big book release event here in Omaha, and my daughter was there signing Sky. She was signing copies for everybody. She's 7 years old, and of course, she fully understands the concept of reincarnation and past lives, but she hasn't read the book. I don't think she could fully absorb the story quite yet. Maybe when she's 10 or 12, I plan on letting her start reading the copy and, figuring out how her mom and I were connected in multiple past lives. And yeah, it's, it's I'll put it this way. If somebody's looking for the craziest true story you've ever read, try picking up the Sky Diaries. Yeah. It's, some people close, family and friends, told me, first of all, they say this needs to be made into a movie, which we're trying to get in touch with some people regarding that. But other people were like, this is so crazy. You probably could have labeled it as fiction and still sold it just the same. And I said, yeah, I know I could have. I just couldn't in my heart do that because it's 100% true story. Like everything in the book actually happened the way I wrote it. And it's a long journey, but it has to do with how we discovered that we were connected as Native Americans in past lifetimes. And it's about Sky's mom reincarnating back into her own family tree and how we discovered that. And the book is about the series of miracles that came forth to bring Sky into the world, because we were told we did not have very good odds of conceiving a child.
Right. And, 4%, right?
4%. Yes, you got to that point. Yeah,
I did.
But yeah, it's so if anyone is interested in Native American culture, reincarnation, there's a lot of content in the book as well about guardian angels and how guardian angels operate and how sometimes they're actually family members that we've lost. Yeah. And we were, gosh, it was surreal back on January 11th, the day the book came out. And when we found out the book actually became a #1 bestseller in those categories of Native American, guardian angels, reincarnation, it was I don't know, it was a dream come true, because I mean, this book, we've been talking about this book for years. I mean, I wrote it 5 years ago and just kind of been sitting on it and wondering when the time would be right to present it to the world. And so, yeah, it's as you can tell, it's a topic that I'm passionate about, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations on all of that. And I'm glad that you stopped sitting on it and you put it out there to the world. It really is a great read. It's an easy read. It's a fun read. You even put pictures in there, which I loved, because I was able to see pictures of you when you were younger, your family, your dad, your grandmother, her sister, your Sky's mom.
Everybody's in there.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I love that. I'm such a visual person. So it kind of, was really great to have those pictures in there. So I wanted to just maybe end with a little advice that you can give to parents if
Yeah.
their child begins to start talking about this? How do you respond? How do you respond in a way that it doesn't shut the child down and that the child doesn't learn that, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this? And I was just wondering if you can help assist parents that may actually be experiencing this and they're just kind of like, oh, okay. And they don't even know how to respond. So they're not responding. But how do you handle it?
First thing is to not overreact. Like I said, when my daughter said the things that she said and she started to have memories of who she used to be, I started crying, and I didn't want her to see that because I didn't want her to think she had done anything wrong. I didn't. So don't overreact. And the other thing, if your child says something potentially that has significance in terms of past lifetimes or the afterlife, don't ask leading questions, because children, yes, they're wildly intuitive, and yes, they're amazing, but they're also, what's the right word I'm trying to say? They can be easily influenced. So don't ask leading questions such as, oh, do you think you used to be Uncle Bobby? Were you Uncle Bobby in your past life? Because then the child's going to go, oh yeah, sure, why not? Ask open-ended questions, And Sky still, to this day, she will sometimes make things, she'll say things that correlate to a time period before she was born. And my response is always the same. I go, wow, that's really interesting. What else do you remember? And sometimes her answers, I don't know. It's, she's just describing a feeling of deja vu. And I say, wow, that's, well, if you think of anything else, you can always talk with me about it. But yeah, that's opening Pandora's box, which sometimes I do on social media, admittedly, just sometimes for sheer entertainment. On my Facebook page, I'll post, what's the craziest thing you've ever heard a child say? And you got umpteen comments of parents, and it's all similar. It's kids who remember past lifetimes. It's kids who remember being big and being other people and other roles once upon a time. But make sure your child is loved, accepted, remind them that they're safe, create a feeling of acceptance, know that they can talk with you. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that generally, people who are listening to a program like this, they're either open-minded or they want to be more open-minded. Mm-hmm. So that, people listening to a program like this wouldn't be the type that would shut a kid down. But yeah, just make sure they're loved and accepted, and make sure that they know that they can speak freely when they have memories or feelings of deja vu, because kids nowadays have enough to deal with, with the anxiety of just the world and the state that it's in. And yeah, but kids are remarkably intuitive. I say, you look at a kid who's 3 and 4 years old, you're looking at a human X-ray machine. They don't look at you, they can look through you. They're remarkably psychic. And for those children, who are lucky enough to have open-minded parents to foster that, sometimes that intuition carries into adulthood. So, that's what we want, because intuition, as you know, as a healer and an intuitive person yourself, intuition, it's truly a gift. So we need to retain that for as long as we can.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. And, the other thing I'm going to have to dive into, because you're the second person this month that I have spoken to or had read something about a past life with the Sioux Nation of Native American.
Yeah.
And when I was a little girl, I was drawn to Native American culture. In New York, we would have the Native American, they would call it the Indian Festival at the time. I don't know if they would still call it that now. And I remember just hearing the drums and the singing that they would do. And I would wear this little blanket that my mom bought me there and just like dance around and just like feel, even to this day, when I hear like a drum powwow, so connected to it. And, so I wonder, I don't know, I might have to do a little more information about the Sioux, because again, I always pay attention to these signs, right? And if it happens more than once, and I'm like, okay, there it is again. I know I have some sort of Native American connection. I did 2 past life regressions where I didn't get a whole lot of information, but was able to see myself in a tribe around a fire. And one past life, I was this really old, tall medicine woman and like exhausted, no idea what tribe or whatever. But again, I have like these Native American memories. So yeah, so I might have to set the intention to see or ask, why is the Sioux tribe, why does this keep coming up? Why do I keep having people on my podcast that are very connected here?
Well, hey, maybe you were in that past lifetime when I was a Native American too. And if so, I hope we had fun and caused a lot of trouble together. So,
me too.
I do have to ask though, if it's okay for me to ask you a question. You're in New York now. Are you from like Minnesota or Wisconsin area?
No, born and
I,
raised in New York.
you got this little, I call it the Wisconsin accent. I'm just picking up a little bit of that. So makes me wonder, I don't know, maybe in a past life you were Sioux, but you live somewhere near Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Oh, interesting. And I haven't been to either of those, and I don't even know what people sound like there. So that's okay.
It's a great accent. You'd love it. You'd love it.
I'll make a mental note of that.
Yeah.
Well,
It's funny that you say though, because you pinpointed possibly two past lives where you were a Native American, and we, modern day people, you think Native American and immediately our brain goes to like 1700s, 1800s. But the reality is Native Americans of many tribes, they've been around for thousands and thousands of years. So,
right.
You could have lived a lifetime, 700 years ago, and you just haven't gone that far back into your past life, your bin of past lifetimes. So yeah, it's a really deep rabbit hole. I do past life sessions for people every day of the week. And, gosh, you just never know where you're going to end up. It's like sometimes we end up, the Roman Colosseum, and then other times we're on a boat in Thailand, and other lifetimes, I've seen lifetimes where people are in New York, in the 1800s. So you just never know. It's like, it's as interesting to me as like the script of a Hollywood movie. So
yeah. Have you ever done a past life regression where somebody was from a different solar system?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm still waiting for that. I've met a couple people who I kind of assume aren't from around here, but I've never seen a past life connection necessarily. And I've never in all my years doing this, I've never come across a person who is somebody famous in a past lifetime.
Interesting.
I've come across a person who was, at important dinner parties with a famous person, but wasn't the actual person themselves. So somewhere I'm still determined to bump into somebody who was maybe Einstein or George Washington in a past life, but it hasn't happened yet.
That'd be cool. Or maybe Tesla. That would be.
Oh yeah, there you go.
More fascinating.
Exactly.
Well, and yeah, it's been great, Andy, to speak with you. You had told me before we started, I just want to know a little bit more about this because you're also a podcaster. You have a podcast called Paranormal Dads.
Yeah.
So just tell me a little bit more about that because, our listeners are probably always looking for more.
Yeah, Paranormal Dads. We have fun with it. It's two good buddies of mine, Eddie and Pat. And we're dads, so it's almost like, taking the kids to soccer practice and band practice. But we're all fascinated by the paranormal. So we talk about ghost stories, UFOs, conspiracy theories, Atlantis, pretty much anything weird. And we do it with a humorous slant. So we have a lot of laughter. We crack a lot of bad dad jokes on the show. And we talk Bigfoot. We talk anything you could imagine. And we have a lot of fun. You can find that show on anywhere, Spotify, Podbean, podcasts. And yeah, it's good. And as far as the Sky Diaries, you can find that on Amazon. The Sky Diaries is available paperback or ebook. And yeah, I hope anyone who reads it has a good time with it.
Great. And it also sounds like I would just want to give a plug to your mediumship sessions. You do some past life regression. So if people wanted to book a session with you, where can they find that information? How do they do that?
Yep. Best spot to find all my information is my website, which is andymyersonline.com. And Myers, and there's like 10 ways to spell it. Mine's MYERS, andymyersonline.com. It has links to my social media, podcasts, my books. Sky Diaries is the fourth book that I've written. So there's a lot to choose from on there. And I'm just grateful that you gave me a chance to be on your show. And I have to say, listeners already know this, but you really do have really wonderful energy, really kind energy. So
Thank you.
I can see why you fell into the line of healing like you do, because you have that gentle nature about you. So
thank you, Andy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really love doing this, and I love supporting people like yourself and giving them the opportunity to share the work that they're doing in the world. And I really enjoyed the book. So thank you. And I'm glad we connected. Maybe again, right? Maybe we were connected in a past life, and here we are again. And my soul group is growing in this lifetime. So
there you go. It might be flying cars next time we come back, but we'll see where we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Andy, thank you so much. Again, everyone, the book is called The Sky Diaries, a true story of reincarnation. If you're watching this on Path 11 TV, there's the copy of it. That's what it looks like. And I am just so excited that I got a chance to talk to Andy and you guys got a chance to listen in. So I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. Go out and purchase the book, follow him on social media, maybe book a session with him. If you do, just let him know that you heard him here on the Path 11 podcast. So take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And next week, I'm going to bring you another really extraordinary guest. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate and review the Path 11 podcast in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, this podcast is made possible by our sponsor, Path 11 TV. Visit path11tv.com to start a 7-day free trial and start streaming over 100 hours of exclusive video content on consciousness, healing, and life after death. That's path11tv.com, and be sure to use coupon code podcast30 to take 30% off your annual membership. Start satisfying your spiritual curiosity with a membership to Path 11 TV today. Bye for now.